All right, this is another one of our Bible stories. This one is called The Cross. This is when Jesus suffers and dies for our sins. The soldiers crucified Jesus. 2 robbers also hung on crosses, one on each side of Jesus. Although it was the middle of the afternoon, the sun disappeared and a great darkness came over the land. "It is finished," Jesus said, and then he breathed his last breath and died. To some people, it may have looked as if everything Jesus said and did was pointless, but the reason Jesus died in this way was because his sacrifice was God's plan from the very beginning. Because Jesus is God's true Son, he always knew it would be this way. By his death, Jesus took on himself the punishment for all the sin that people have done and still are doing. Jesus took every person's punishment and died for us. He did this to take away our sins so we will not be judged by God for our sins. But for Jesus' friends who watched it, this was the saddest day in their life. They did not understand what was going on. They wondered why God allowed Jesus to die. But this was going to change very soon, because we know that Jesus does not stay dead. So this is Easter morning. Jesus was taken down from the cross and buried in a cave. A huge rock was placed right in front of it because they didn't want people to try to take Jesus' body. But early in the morning, on the 3rd day after Jesus died, a mighty angel went to the cave and rolled away the stone from the entrance. And then Jesus stepped out. He was no longer dead. He was alive. God had brought Jesus back to life. And if you look really closely, you can still see the holes in his hands from where he was on the cross.
Sit on the cross.
A little later that same morning, 2 of Jesus' disciples, Peter and John, and a woman named Mary Magdalene came to see the cave where Jesus had been buried. But when they got there, they could see that the big stone had been rolled away and Jesus was no longer there. Peter went inside the cave and found Jesus' clothes lying on the stone where his dead body had been placed. Peter and John went back home and wondered what to do. Mary Magdalene stayed behind. When she went up to the cave, she saw 2 angels. One of them said to her, "Why are you looking for Jesus here? He is not here. He has risen from the dead and is alive again, just like he told you." Mary believed what the angel said, and she was no longer sad because she knew Jesus was alive. Then Jesus himself spoke to Mary and told her the truth. He was alive. Mary was so happy, she went back to tell everyone the wonderful news. This is the day we know as Easter, and we celebrate it joyfully. Later that evening, while the disciples were together in a house, Jesus came into the room and talked with them. The disciples touched him to make sure he was really alive, and now they were no longer sad. They were full of joy and happiness. After this, Jesus showed himself to many other people too. All people who saw Jesus knew for sure that he was alive again and that God had raised him from the dead. And how do they all look now that Jesus is alive again? They all look happy. He looked shocked.